Good evening. I'm speaking to you tonight from a secure facility following what may be one of the most unsettling classified briefings I've attended in my years on the Intelligence Committee. What I'm about to share represents intelligence assessments that reveal a disturbing evolution in modern warfare, one where the very weather patterns that sustain human civilization have become weapons in the hands of hostile nations. The information I'll present tonight comes from our most sensitive intelligence sources, including satellite reconnaissance, atmospheric monitoring systems, and classified assessments from our environmental security experts that paint a picture of warfare unlike anything we've confronted in human history. This isn't science fiction. This is strategic reality unfolding above our heads and beneath our feet. For generations, we've understood warfare in terms of armies, navies, air forces, and nuclear weapons. Those frameworks prove inadequate for addressing a new category of threat where adversaries can manipulate rainfall, trigger droughts, intensify storms, and redirect ocean currents to achieve strategic objectives without deploying a single soldier or firing a single shot. Over the next several minutes, I'll walk you through China's systematic development of weather modification technologies that could control water supplies across South Asia, Russia's strategic exploitation of Arctic ice melts to dominate new shipping routes and energy reserves, and a comprehensive assessment of how climate engineering has become the ultimate strategic weapon. This represents more than environmental policy or climate science. This is about the weaponization of Earth's atmospheric and oceanic systems to achieve geopolitical objectives that could determine which nations prosper and which face environmental catastrophe in the coming decades. The implications extend far beyond traditional security concerns to encompass fundamental questions about sovereignty over natural systems, the ethics of weather modification, and the potential for environmental conflicts that could affect billions of people while remaining virtually invisible to their victims. Global stage. In the classified assessment rooms, where America's environmental security strategy is developed, a sobering analysis has emerged that fundamentally reframes how we must understand modern threats to global stability. Traditional security frameworks focused on conventional military threats have proven inadequate for addressing the systematic weaponization of environmental systems by hostile nations. As I review the latest intelligence on atmospheric manipulation technologies and climate engineering programs, one fact becomes unmistakably clear: we are witnessing the emergence of environmental warfare as a primary tool of strategic competition. Nations that achieve mastery over weather patterns, ocean currents, and atmospheric systems will wield more power over global affairs than those with the largest military arsenals. The scope of environmental warfare extends far beyond traditional concepts of military engagement. What we're observing is the systematic manipulation of Earth's natural systems to create advantages in agriculture, water resources, shipping routes, and energy access, while imposing corresponding disadvantages on strategic competitors and regional rivals. China's weather modification program now operates over 1.6 million square kilometers, an area larger than Mongolia, using cloud seeding, atmospheric heating, and ionospheric manipulation to control precipitation patterns across regions that provide water resources for over 40% of global agriculture. The strategic implications of controlling rainfall over the Himalayas extend far beyond Chinese territory to encompass water security for India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and much of Southeast Asia. Russia's strategic positioning in the Arctic represents another dimension of environmental warfare, where accelerated ice melting, whether naturally occurring or artificially enhanced, creates new shipping routes and energy access opportunities while potentially disrupting global climate patterns in ways that benefit Russian agriculture while imposing costs on competitors. The United States possesses extensive atmospheric research capabilities through programs dating back to the Cold War, but intelligence assessments suggest that current environmental modification capabilities lag behind those being developed by strategic competitors who face fewer ethical and legal constraints on environmental manipulation research. The stakes could not be higher. In a world where agriculture, water resources, and habitable territory are increasingly constrained by climate change, nations that control environmental systems will determine which populations prosper and which face displacement, famine, and social collapse. Historical context. The weaponization of environmental systems traces its conceptual origins to early atmospheric research programs developed during the Cold War, when both superpowers explored the military applications of weather modification, earthquake generation, and atmospheric manipulation for strategic advantage. The United States conducted extensive weather modification experiments during the Vietnam War through Operation Popeye, which used cloud seeding to extend monsoon seasons and disrupt enemy supply lines. While these operations achieved tactical success, they also demonstrated the potential for environmental warfare to affect civilian populations in ways that challenged existing laws of warfare. International recognition of environmental warfare potential led to the Environmental Modification Convention of 1977, which prohibited military use of environmental modification techniques for hostile purposes. However, this treaty contains significant loopholes that allow research for peaceful purposes while providing minimal oversight of programs that could serve dual civilian and military applications. The transformation of environmental warfare capabilities accelerated dramatically with advances in atmospheric science, satellite technology, and computational modeling that enable precise targeting of weather modification efforts while maintaining plausible deniability about their military applications. Now we come to the most critical part of this assessment. The convergence of climate change with advanced weather modification technologies has created strategic opportunities that transcend the original frameworks for environmental warfare. When natural climate disruption provides cover for artificial environmental manipulation, hostile actors can achieve strategic objectives while maintaining that observed effects result from natural climate variation rather than deliberate intervention. China's massive investments in atmospheric research, ionospheric heating facilities, and cloud seeding capabilities have created comprehensive weather modification systems that can operate across continental scales while maintaining the appearance of natural weather variation. The integration of these capabilities with broader geopolitical strategy represents a fundamental evolution in environmental warfare. The COVID-19 pandemic demonstrated how environmental factors can cascade through global systems to create economic and political disruption far beyond their immediate geographic impact, providing strategic planners with models for how environmental manipulation could achieve comprehensive political objectives through apparently natural mechanisms. Your current events layer. Intelligence reports from the past 72 hours reveal significant acceleration in environmental warfare activities across multiple theaters. Satellite monitoring has detected unusual atmospheric heating patterns over the Tibetan Plateau, while oceanographic sensors report anomalous current modifications in Arctic shipping routes that correspond with Russian research vessel activities. The most concerning development involves what analysts are calling precision climate strikes, targeted weather modification operations designed to affect specific agricultural regions, water resources, or transportation networks during critical periods. These operations integrate real-time atmospheric data with economic intelligence to maximize strategic impact while maintaining plausible deniability. Recent intelligence indicates that China's weather modification operations have expanded beyond traditional cloud seeding to include ionospheric heating that can influence jet stream patterns across Eurasia. These capabilities provide China with potential influence over weather patterns affecting Russian agriculture, European energy consumption, and South Asian monsoon systems. The element that nobody talks about but changes the entire picture is the integration of climate engineering with migration warfare operations designed to create refugee flows that destabilize target nations. Artificial drought induction, flood generation, and agricultural disruption can trigger population movements that serve broader geopolitical strategies while appearing to result from natural climate variation. In the Arctic region, we've documented Russian activities that may involve accelerated ice melting through underwater heating systems, submarine deployed devices, or atmospheric modification techniques designed to ensure year-round access to shipping routes and energy resources that would otherwise remain inaccessible. European environmental monitoring agencies report correlation between Chinese atmospheric research activities and unusual precipitation patterns that have affected European agriculture and hydroelectric power generation, suggesting potential testing of intercontinental weather modification capabilities. Actors' internal motivations. United States environmental security calculations. From Washington's perspective, environmental warfare represents both a significant threat to American agricultural and economic interests and an opportunity to develop capabilities that could provide strategic advantages over competitors who depend on predictable climate patterns for economic stability. Our strategic framework has been constrained by legal and ethical considerations that limit research into offensive environmental modification capabilities, while competitors who operate under different governance systems face no such constraints on environmental warfare development. The challenge lies in developing defensive capabilities that can protect American interests from environmental manipulation while maintaining international legal obligations and environmental commitments that define American global leadership on climate issues. Chinese environmental strategy. Beijing's environmental warfare capabilities reflect their understanding that control over water resources and agricultural productivity provides more sustainable strategic leverage than conventional military power. Chinese environmental strategy integrates weather modification with broader geographic expansion and resource control objectives. The Chinese approach emphasizes developing capabilities that can influence environmental conditions across regions that are economically dependent on China while maintaining the appearance of natural climate variation that prevents effective international responses to environmental manipulation. Russian Arctic exploitation. Moscow's environmental strategy builds on their geographic advantages in Arctic regions that become increasingly valuable as climate change creates new opportunities for resource extraction and transportation routes that bypass international choke points. Russian environmental capabilities focus on accelerating changes that benefit Russian geographic and economic interests, while imposing costs on competitors who depend on stable climate patterns for agricultural and economic activities. Vulnerable nation responses. Countries that depend on stable climate patterns for agriculture, water resources, and economic stability face the challenge of developing resilience to environmental warfare while lacking the technological capabilities or economic resources to develop effective countermeasures or retaliation capabilities. Small island nations and low-lying regions face particular vulnerabilities to sea level manipulation, ocean current modification, and storm intensification that could be deployed as tools of environmental coercion by powers seeking to influence their political alignment or economic relationships. Strategic conflict areas. Water resource control. The systematic manipulation of precipitation patterns over critical watersheds represents the most immediate threat from environmental warfare, with the potential to affect agricultural productivity, hydroelectric power generation, and water security for billions of people across multiple nations and regions. Chinese control over Himalayan water resources through weather modification could provide Beijing with strategic leverage over South Asian nations that depend on glacier melt and monsoon precipitation for agricultural and economic survival, creating dependencies that could be exploited for political and economic concessions. Agricultural warfare through climate manipulation. This is where the real breakdown begins. The deliberate targeting of agricultural regions through drought induction, flood generation, or growing season disruption represents a form of warfare that could create famine conditions while maintaining plausible deniability about artificial causation. Climate manipulation targeting agricultural regions could achieve strategic objectives equivalent to conventional military occupation while avoiding the international legal consequences and military costs associated with traditional warfare, creating new categories of conflict that existing international frameworks were never designed to address. Arctic territorial competition. Environmental manipulation in Arctic regions could accelerate ice melting and ocean current changes that provide permanent strategic advantages in shipping routes, energy access, and territorial claims while imposing costs on nations that depend on stable Arctic climate patterns for their economic and security interests. Migration pressure generation. Environmental warfare designed to create population displacement could achieve strategic objectives equivalent to traditional military operations while exploiting humanitarian obligations and refugee protection systems that prevent effective responses to artificially induced migration pressure. Global supply chain disruption. Climate manipulation targeting critical transportation routes, port facilities, or manufacturing regions could disrupt global supply chains in ways that provide economic advantages to nations with environmental warfare capabilities while imposing disproportionate costs on competitors who depend on predictable environmental conditions. The multipolar reality. The emergence of environmental warfare as a primary tool of great power competition represents a fundamental transformation in how nations project power and influence in ways that transcend traditional concepts of military strength and economic leverage. Unlike conventional warfare that requires extensive military infrastructure and creates obvious evidence of hostile action, environmental warfare can achieve strategic objectives through technologies and activities that appear to serve legitimate scientific research while providing comprehensive capabilities for environmental manipulation. The success of environmental warfare depends on maintaining plausible deniability about artificial causation, while natural climate variation provides cover for deliberate environmental manipulation designed to achieve specific economic and political objectives at the expense of target nations. The factor that nobody discusses but transforms the entire equation is the irreversibility of many environmental changes once triggered through artificial manipulation. Unlike conventional military actions that can be reversed through diplomatic negotiations or military responses, environmental warfare can create permanent changes to climate systems that continue affecting target populations for decades after the initial manipulation. The implications extend beyond immediate strategic competition to encompass fundamental questions about international law, environmental sovereignty, and the ability of existing institutional frameworks to address conflicts that operate through natural systems that transcend national boundaries while serving specific national strategic objectives. For democratic societies, environmental warfare presents unprecedented challenges in developing responses that protect national interests while maintaining environmental commitments and international legal obligations that define democratic governance and global leadership on climate issues. As we confront this new dimension of warfare, the fundamental question facing democratic leadership is whether we can develop effective responses to environmental warfare that protect our interests and allies while preserving the international cooperation necessary to address legitimate climate challenges that require global coordination rather than strategic competition. The answer will determine more than immediate strategic outcomes. It will establish whether environmental systems remain global commons managed through international cooperation or become strategic assets controlled by powers willing to weaponize natural systems for geopolitical advantage. This challenge requires developing new legal frameworks, detection capabilities, and response mechanisms that can address environmental warfare while maintaining international cooperation on legitimate climate issues that require coordination among all nations, regardless of their strategic relationships. The stakes extend beyond immediate security concerns to encompass fundamental questions about environmental stewardship, international law, and the preservation of natural systems that support global civilization against their weaponization by powers seeking strategic advantage through environmental manipulation. The future of global environmental governance and climate cooperation may depend on our ability to distinguish between legitimate climate research and environmental warfare while developing effective responses that preserve both national security and international environmental cooperation. Thank you for your attention to this critical assessment. The environmental warfare capabilities I've outlined tonight represent challenges that will define not only international security, but the fundamental relationship between human civilization and Earth's natural systems for generations to come. The manipulation of weather patterns and climate systems for strategic advantage threatens to undermine both national security and global environmental cooperation in ways that could affect every person on Earth, while remaining largely invisible to their intended victims. I'll continue monitoring these developments closely and will provide updated assessments as environmental warfare capabilities evolve. The security of our nation and the stability of global environmental systems depend on understanding and responding to these challenges with both strategic clarity and environmental responsibility. Thank you and good evening.